So last week as we gathered, we began hearing together Jesus' words from the Sermon on the Mount, found in the Gospel of Matthew. Jeff, as he talked to us about the Beatitudes, the blessed are passages, encouraged us to sit down sometime and read that whole sermon, Matthew 5 through 7, if you haven't ever read it. I concur. Spend some time with these words of Jesus. In a continuation of this passage, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, after telling us who those are who are blessed, the poor, the meek, the peacemakers, continues on to offer us two metaphors for the life of faith. To those who would follow him, he declares, "You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world." Salt and light. Two of life's most basic elements, necessities. Did you happen to know that there are only 4 ounces of salt in each one of our bodies? 4 ounces. Did you know without it, our muscles will not contract, our blood won't flow, our food won't digest, and our hearts won't beat? Now, I never had to worry too much about salt in my family. We've always salted everything. Not sure if that's a southern thing. We salt watermelon, we salt cantaloupe, and wait for it, we salt strawberries. Yeah. My grandma used to make the best brine pickles anybody's ever had. And my Aunt Edith used to literally salt ice cubes in a glass and eat them outright. Maybe having been raised on a farm, she spent too much time watching the cows gather around the salt lick. Yes. But then I'm not one to talk, since I used to eat salt straight out of my hand. These days, I've moderated a little bit. I just like to eat salt and vinegar chips. The point is, we all need salt. We can't live without it. I once read an article about the history of salt. Over the years, taxes have been imposed on it, wars have been waged over it, and it was even used as a form of money. And it's been a powerful religious symbol for many. Plato said that salt was dear to the gods. The Hebrew people included salt with their sacrifices in the temple. And Catholics sometimes put salt on the tongue of an infant being baptized as a sign of wisdom. When making peace or resolving a conflict, even sometimes today, Arabs say to one another in a proverb, "There is salt between us." Salt preserves meat, tans leather, heals wounds, and pretty much keeps us alive. Poet Pablo Neruda writes, "The smallest miniature wave from the salt cellar reveals to us more than domestic whiteness. In it, we taste infinitude." Light, well, we absolutely need that, especially those of us who find ourselves on these cloudy winter days feeling a little more down, a little more depressed, a little more considering maybe we need to go out and invest in one of those light boxes. We know how much we need light. And without question, light in all of its forms has many symbolic meanings in our lives. We say that light illumines our mind and our path. Light serves as a beacon in the storm. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot put it out. The light of fire purifies or makes holy. We say things like, her face was glowing. Her passion was ignited. They rekindled their relationship. Her anger flared. His hope faded. Our language itself is filled with images of and references to light. This week, just a few days ago, we held our monthly vigil in support of Black Lives Matter. 500 people showed up. Signs and candles lit on a dark and very cold night. It reminded me of a poem written by a man named Paul Lacey following the vigil for Matthew Shepard. If you remember, he was a young gay man who was killed by hate and prejudice many years ago. In his poem, Paul Lacey says, "It's hard to keep a candle lit. Shelter it with your hand. Hunch your body around it, and still the smallest breeze will snuff it out. Overprotect it and it flares up, singes your fingers, licks at your coat. How can I keep vigil when all I can attend to is not losing this sign of frailty, this tiny cone of light? But when it goes out, my neighbor rekindles it, and I struggle again to keep it aflame. When I glance up, I see other flames flickering in danger, almost out, but casting light through sheltering hands, a glow on gentle, determined faces. Is this what it means to keep vigil, sharing the light?" Jesus said to those who would be his followers, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." Now, those of us who grew up in church, especially in a conservative tradition, have probably heard this text before. We've been told exactly what this passage means. Be true to your calling. Be faithful to Jesus. Salt that isn't salty is no good, neither is light that doesn't shine, so get out of the salt shaker. Get out from under the barrel. Get into the world. Share the good news. Let people see God working in your life. Be evangelists. Yes, I said it. That scary word that conjures up images of Bible-thumping preachers standing on street corners, damning everyone in sight to hell. Believe me, I cringe sometimes myself at that E word, just as many of you might. But I want to know, how did this word from the Greek, evangelion, meaning good news, come to produce such a horrible picture in our minds? Well, most likely because it's how we've most often seen this text, this interpretation of this text, put into practice. And that's sad to me, because I think in so many ways people have missed the point. Yes, we are called to bear witness to our faith. But what is the faith to which we bear witness? First and foremost, it is supposed to be good news. In the book, Stealing Jesus, How Fundamentalism Betrays Christianity, Bruce Bauer describes two types of Christians, legalistic and non-legalistic. And without getting into his choice of terms, Bauer describes legalistic Christians as those whose faith requires not so much an interactive personal experience with God, but rather an intellectual assent to various propositions about Jesus, God, and the Bible. For example, he says one might say, God has a plan for your life, and if you just accept these 4 spiritual laws, that's all you need to do, and you will be saved. The reason I bring this up is because I believe that it is this kind of propositional spirituality that turns evangelism, what is supposed to be sharing good news, into verbal boxing matches or pronouncements of condemnation. See, when you think that way, you have to make everyone believe exactly as you believe, which is, it seems to me, a fairly egocentric or ethnocentric way of looking at the world. But I think that that's the reason why many conservative ministers can proclaim things such as God doesn't hear the prayer of a Jew, or you can't be gay and Christian, or something along the lines that Muslims don't worship the same God. Because when you think that belief has to be exactly as you see it, and it's just about an assent to propositions, then it's easy to create insiders and outsiders. What's ironic to me is that we all have so much in common. Yeah. I was at a gathering yesterday where the song was being sung. Some of you may know this song. It's called How Great Is Our God. Does anybody know that song? You ever heard that song? Do you know that song? Yeah, I'm going to sing it, sorry. It's like, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God. Right? You all know that one? Okay, so I sat there during this meeting and I was thinking about, this sermon, and I was thinking about the fact that actually in Arabic, you could actually do that song too. And it would, you know how it would go? It would go, Allahu Akbar, sing with me, Allahu Akbar, right? Because Allahu Akbar means God is great, right? See, even ideas like God is great, or in Christian tradition, God is love, lose their appeal when declared with bitterness and violence. And that's true in any tradition, including our own. Statesman, orator, and former enslaved person Frederick Douglass said, between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. So wide that to receive the one as good, pure, and holy is of necessity to reject the other as bad, corrupt, and wicked. To be a friend of the one is by necessity to be the enemy of the other. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ, he says. Therefore I hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, he wrote, I can see no reason but the most deceitful one for calling the religion of this land Christianity. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. Now, I don't think that many of us here have a problem disassociating ourselves from slavery justifying Christianity, or even ultra-right-wing Christianity that we see in our country today. But I want to say I don't think that alone is sufficient. Just because we disagree or call ourselves by another name, liberals, doesn't mean we're actually doing it the way Jesus taught us to. See, sometimes I wonder even if we in the liberal traditions of Christianity promote the idea of intellectual assent to a set of propositions. Our propositions might sound a little different, though. We say, feed the hungry, help the poor, free the oppressed, be inclusive, love your enemies. And these are good things for everyone to believe. But the problem is these are not propositions. They're commands. And those folks, the folks we call the hungry, the poor, the oppressed, the excluded, the enemies, they're not mere abstractions. They're real people with hopes, dreams, names, and stories. How often do we write our check to charity so that we don't have to remember that? As I was growing up, whenever a question was asked in Sunday school, the kids would all raise their hands. Oh. And the answer, what was it?
Jesus.
Jesus! It was always Jesus, no matter what the question was. There's a story of a pastor who asked the children during a children's sermon, what's the name of that small, gray, furry animal with a bushy tail? And a boy raised his hand and he said, well, I know the answer is Jesus, but it sounds like a squirrel. Later on in my life, when I was working as a youth pastor in a liberal, upper-middle-class Presbyterian church, we'd gather the young people together for discussion on Sunday nights, and they'd all show up, 16, 17 years old, in their leather jackets, driving their BMWs. And invariably, when a question was raised, the immediate response would be, feed the hungry. Good answer. But for them, it made about as much sense as Jesus and the squirrel. It didn't have anything to do with their actual experience, you see. It's what they were supposed to say. Jesus loves the little children. It's easy enough to say, easy enough to believe, unless those children happen to be refugees. unless they're poor and dirty, unless they're disruptive during our precious Sunday morning worship hour. Love your enemies. Easy enough to say, easy enough to believe. Unless those enemies are sexist, unless they're bigots, unless they're homophobic fundamentalists, those are the enemies I have trouble with. Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann offers yet another perspective. He says the crisis in the U.S. church has almost nothing to do with being liberal or conservative, but it has everything to do with giving up on the faith and discipline of our Christian baptism and settling for a common, generic U.S. identity that is part patriotism, part consumerism, part violence, and part affluence. Have we given over our faith? Have we forgotten that Jesus told us that he came not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them? See, the prophet Isaiah told us that worship and prayer were empty, if justice was left undone. If life's essentials, food, clothing, shelter, dignity, were denied to anyone. Who cares if we go to church every week or know the Lord's Prayer by heart, if we're not actually bringing good news in our lives? And that means bringing justice and liberation to all who are oppressed and marginalized. What difference does it make if we consider our worship conservative or liberal? Does God care which songs we sing or if we've got the correct liturgy if we're not actually living the faith of Jesus? Being true to our calling, being salt and light in the world is not an easy task. Too many people think that following in Jesus' footsteps means taking a trip to the Holy Land or going to heaven when they die. Have we forgotten that Jesus also said, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven? And what I think he meant is this: unless you, as a community of faith, embody justice more than lawyers, more than social services, more than any political party, then you will never understand what it means to participate in what God is doing in the world. Can I say that again? Unless you, as a community of faith, embody justice more than lawyers, more than social workers, more than any political party, you will never understand what it means to participate with what God is doing in the world. I think that's what Jesus is telling us our faith needs to be. To be exceedingly just. To follow in Jesus' footsteps is to be doing what is right. It is to incarnate justice, to rub salt in the wound of oppression, to bring light in the midst of the night. It is to be bearers of genuine good news. What is essential to the Christian according to Jesus is justice, fairness, equality in the world. Not just saying the right words. People of salt and light are those who work for justice, those who keep making space around God's table. Because at God's table, we know that everyone is welcome. Salt is a powerful symbol. It's essential. It's a sign of what is possible, of restored relationships. There is salt between us. You are the salt of the earth. Light is also a powerful symbol. It's essential. Light is a sign of prophetic justice, hope, and solidarity. You are the light of the world. Bread. Bread is a powerful symbol. It's made from basic elements with salt and fire. It comes in many shapes and sizes and colors. It nourishes our body and gives us energy. Writer Frederick Buechner says that to eat bread is to acknowledge our dependence, both on food and on each other. It's essential. Bread is a sign of God's abundance and of our communion, our renewed connection with God and with our neighbor. It's a sign of our vision for a world with justice. This cup is a powerful symbol. It is a sign of devotion and sacrificial love. This cup reminds us of Jesus' lifeblood poured out. It is a sign that this journey of faith is not easy, but that it is the most important commitment that we can ever make. As we prepare ourselves to gather around this table, you are invited to share the bread and the cup, to be the salt and the light. And as we participate in this ritual together, may these symbols be essential for you. You join with me as we sing One Bread, One Body. The hymn is printed in the